But already we're starting to get warning shots from disease over our bow. There are already disease outbreaks occurring. One of the first ones I documented was at an atoll called French Frigate Shoals in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Now, you might say, well, why was the first disease outbreak discovered there? Well, I didn't start looking at the main Hawaiian Islands till 2004. Okay? So what I found out here in 2003 is this is a table coral. All this tan part is all the healthy. And this area that's kind of discolored and white, that's the area where this disease, a cropper white syndrome, has killed off that coral animal. And that word white syndrome means merely a disease that causes tissue loss. Okay, that's all that means. So if you ever read that in the literature or anything else, don't assign anything else to it. A disease that causes tissue loss, just like a cold is a disease that causes a cough and a runny nose. That's it, signs of disease. So already we started seeing an outbreak in here in 2003. And my first question for this is this disease a problem? Is it something that we need to worry about? Is this a cold that's going to kill that much and it's going to stop and the coral's going to regrow? Or is this AIDS? Is it going to kill the coral? We didn't know. We didn't know anything about these diseases. So we went up there and we marked a bunch of these individual colonies. Just put a little cable tie on it. Just slipped it right through, mapped it out, photographed it, described it. That was May of '05 up in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. I went back a year later, and this is what I found. 100% mortality here. And you also notice that the coral is starting to break down. Now, as you all know, that the coral reefs are the structure that provides the homes and the houses for all the shrimps and the crabs and the little fish. So if you have loss of this basic structure, you have a loss of your entire coral reef ecosystem. That'll just be it. No fish, no crabs, no nothing. This is the foundation of our reefs. Now, when I went up there originally in '02, I surveyed 6 reefs that had that type of table coral called a cropera. And I didn't see any disease. In fact, those are my easy dives, because as a disease person, you know, you have to go along this belt transect, you have to stop and photograph and describe. It's very time consuming. And every time I dropped down on an cropper reef, there was nothing. They were just beautiful, healthy corals, not even suspicious, you know. There was nothing even suspicious. So when I went there in '03, surveyed 7 of these reefs and found that one, my jaw kind of dropped, because I was expecting an easy dive. I'm like, oh good, in a cropper reef, I dropped down, whew, dying corals all over. Holy cow. I've been up there since, and what you start to see is that this disease that will kill these corals has been steadily increasing through time. Last time I was up there in '06, I surveyed 9 reefs, and this is just my data, not other people's data. Of those, 7 had this disease. Now what you have to understand is if it kills a coral colony that's this big, and this is a small one, right, in a year, that represents 10 to 15 years of growth. Corals do not grow very quickly in 1 year from disease. This is a problem. The other problem for this type of coral here at French Frigate Shoals is this acropora is not found in the main Hawaiian Islands. And in fact, it's found almost predominantly at French Frigate Shoals with just a little populations on each side, at Gardner and a few other places. So we have a real problem up here. We have disease wiping through these corals. Now, when we started doing our surveys in the main Hawaiian Island in '04, not surprisingly, we started to find areas that had problems too, or outbreaks of disease. And one of the areas we found was Kaneohe Bay. And we still have a lot more work to do on this, but we are starting to see a pattern. Embayments, poor water circulation, land-based pollution coming in. So again, white syndrome means purely tissue loss. Here's the red healthy. This is your red rice coral, and this is the area that's been killed by the disease. You can see the active white band right there where the tissue's sloughing off and leaves nothing but dead skeleton. When we first went out in '04, what we noticed is that Kaneohe Bay was much harder hit than some of the other areas that we surveyed. Okay, and this is what Kaneohe Bay looks like, a very distinct embayment with a barrier reef. And so I started thinking, why? Why is this particular disease more common here than the others? These are very windswept, they're not enclosed. This is enclosed, but it's on the dry side of the island. This is on the wet side of the island that gets lots of rain and lots of sediment plumes going into that bay when it rains. I live in Kaneohe, I see it every winter. When it was at '05, we had that 40 days of rain. Oh, that plume extended out into the bay over the reefs for 40 days. Now remember what I told you about the algae that lives inside the coral. Well, algae needs sunlight. So that sediment's not only blocking the sunlight, but it's also smothering that coral so it can't breathe and function normally. It's a problem. So not surprisingly, Kaneohe Bay seemed to have a little bit more. Same thing here. The first question was a little bit death there, but do we need to worry about this? So right there at Coconut Island at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, we use the same technique, tag a colony, only for Kaneohe Bay, we can go every month, not just once a year like Northwestern. And we just follow this disease through time. And this is that colony a year later. You see a little bit of the coral is left. You see there's still disease active, creating this. All in all, it's not quite as virulent or nasty as the acropora in the Northwesterns, but it's still a pretty nasty disease. It just chronically eats through these colonies through time. So this is a little worrisome for us here in Kaneohe Bay. And we're also starting to see the montiporids, the rice corals, are the ones that other people are starting to report to me from other areas, like on Big Island, Waipo. They're starting to tell me of outbreaks on this type of coral. So this is a type of coral we want to keep an eye on in the main Hawaiian Islands, our rice corals. And that's part of the purpose of doing all of this research, because we can't look at everything in all reefs at all times. So if we can start to target which corals are vulnerable, or which types of reefs are more vulnerable, or which diseases are worse, then we can focus our studies and our management of them.